Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT, home, safe home.
Good morning. We are back in better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Another day, another issue away from the wins and losses of it all, dominating the headlines in our little world of sports. And this time, it's the feds going after corruption in college basketball in a big way, and among those right in the middle of it, a Hall of Famer who many feel will not survive this scandal with his job. Golic, what a complete mess we saw play out yesterday.
Well, we wanted to get back to sports. Here we are.
Here we are. Back to sports. Stick to sports, guys.
You wonder when you're one of these assistant coaches and or financial services people or someone associated with Adidas, when you hear these charges, does your head start to spin? And I'll tell you where it stops. When you hear you're charged with bribery, when do you understand it all? Bribery, conspiracy, solicitation of bribes, honest services fraud conspiracy, honest service fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and travel act conspiracy. You'd be going, what the hell does all that mean? And then the U.S. Department of Justice said each of the coaches faces a maximum sentences of 80 years in prison. That they understand.
Yeah,
They're going, okay, you mean all that, what you just read there, can get us 80 years in prison? I doubt it's going to get him 80 years, but it could certainly give him some time and could start a whole trickle-down effect of, okay, I'm going to start singing now to get less, and who else is involved? Holy smokes, what a mess we have going on here. And when you break it all down, which we'll try to do, it really turns out to be two separate things we're going to be talking about.
Correct. There was one that I understood immediately, and there was one I need a little help with, and thankfully I have a lawyer on speed dial.
I was happy to help you when you called me yesterday, except you just called me looking for Jay Billis's number.
I call you when my son turns an ankle. I call Jay Billis when I need legal assistance.
Exactly.
Because there was something in this that I didn't understand why it was a crime. I understand. We'll get into it. Let's start with off the top here. Let's dive into some of the other issues here, and then we will get into the NCAA stuff in detail. Let's start with Dwayne Wade, who plans to sign with the Cavaliers as soon as he clears waivers today. So he and LeBron, they're putting the group back together again, only this time D. Wade's going to be coming off the bench.
Yeah, he is. And these two have shared the most, or I should say D. Wade has shared the most court time with James, over 2,700 minutes in the postseason. So basically it's equivalent to more than 76 playoff games. So they certainly know one another. You'll find a lot of fun little numbers associated with that. But Dwayne Wade is coming off his worst year as far as minutes per game, field goal percentage, points per game on cuts, all different, efficient, effective field goal percentage, all these wacky numbers out there. It wasn't one of his better years, but, Father Time is obviously catching up with him. That's why in this scenario, now we'll see about how much he plays before Isaiah Thomas gets back with the hip, and then after Isaiah Thomas gets back and they get into that rotation, which they're only going to care about in May and June,
right,
of just what he's going to produce off the bench, because we can talk about resting players all you want, and whether they get ripped by it or whether they need it, blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is the resting that the Cavaliers are concerned about is when LeBron needs a 2-minute break, feel free to not give up 9-point leads. Be better when LeBron needs an actual blow during the game to where you can still function, and Dwayne Wade could be a big part of that.
Correct. Wade could, and they've got Derrick Rose who can get you a bucket every now and again, and obviously Isaiah can get you a bucket. So I think that the Wade acquisition for Cleveland is going to be huge.
Yeah.
He is a player, and you read through all those numbers in Chicago last year. The things that he was expected to do in Chicago last year, he can't do anymore.
Right.
But he doesn't have to do those things in Cleveland. He just has to do what you're talking about. And there will be games they will win in the postseason, I'm predicting right now, where you will say the best player on the court was Dwayne Wade. Now, that doesn't mean there'll be 9 of them.
Right.
But there might be 2 of them. And maybe one of them will be against Golden State.
Would you say the only 2 constants are going to be LeBron and Kevin Love? Or would you even say there's going to be one?
Well, let's see how Isaiah comes back. When you say constant.
Constants, because Isaiah's probably not going to start the season.
Oh, yeah.
So, constants from beginning to end. You putting Tristan Thompson in that?
Yeah,
or are you saying just pieces?
How about Zizic?
You want to hit the button?
Okay. Let's move on to the next
Off the top.
Neither team with a chance to lock down a playoff spot in baseball did yesterday. The Cubs still need to win. The Twins' magic number is still 1.
Yeah, Tuesday loss ended the Cubs' winning streak against the Cardinals at 6 games, so they're still looking to lock things up in Minnesota. While they won, their magic number is down to 1, so it's either a win by them or a loss by the Angels. It's just a matter of time, but it's still amazing. Their record is 83-74. And last year they were 59-103, and they've been doing it as of late with the long ball. A couple of home runs yesterday gave the Twins 82 home runs since August 8th. That's most in the majors, and they're 29-18 over that span, tied for the 5th best record in all of baseball.
Yeah, that's a remarkable turnaround for that team. I'm just disappointed because I was hoping for that unprecedented 7-way tie for the second wild card in the American League. I just wanted to see how they'd work it out.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen a person's head actually explode. And we've seen in sports lately a lot of commissioners with a lot on their plate. I mean, Roger Goodell obviously has a lot to deal with right now, and we've seen them all go through a lot of things. But if there was a 7-way tie for the second American League wildcard spot, I think Rob Manfred's head might actually have exploded.
He would call one of his people and say, "Get me the algorithm guy."
Off the top.
I just wanted to see what they would do.
Yeah.
Okay, have we seen this before? A fan got thrown out of the ballpark yesterday in a game between the Yankees and the Rays because the fan sitting behind home plate was yelling at the location of pitches.
Gary Sanchez was up, so is a Yankee fan, so he was trying to tip Gary Sanchez of location by how the catcher was setting up. So he was basically, I think he was doing it in Spanish, was he not?
Correct.
Rambo? Yeah, and he did it a couple of times, and the refs tossed him. Joe Girardi said he had heard it the first time, didn't think much of it, then heard it again and was like, okay, where's that coming from? And the umps heard it as well. And they ended up throwing out the fan, of which Joe Girardi said that is absolutely the correct thing to do when a fan is trying to give away. Look, my thought is you pay money for those tickets, man. You can get away with it. Go ahead, man.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, should you be able to throw out a fan for just yelling out something he can see?
He can see. Everybody can see where the catcher is setting up, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, in theory, if you're sitting
depending
in a spot
where your seat is, if you can see at the end of it.
But not everyone's close enough that if they yelled it out, the batter could hear it. But in that case, I don't know. Did they move him to another area?
I think they
it says
tossed
they were
him.
removed from the park.
I want to know. Listen, we always say look at the back of the ticket. Does it say in there anywhere? I mean, you can get thrown out for certain things. What category does that fall into?
Now, I understand that if you didn't make that against the rule, that every team would just position somebody there to yell that stuff out.
Yeah.
So you can't have it happen. But can you throw a guy out of a ball? If this person legitimately bought his own ticket and was just sitting there and could see it, the guys in the room are yelling back to me, it's like interfering with a ball in play. I don't think it's like interfering with the ball in play. I'm just yelling out something I can see.
Yeah.
Like if I yell out the shift is on, granted the batter can see the shift is on, but I'm just yelling out what I'm seeing on the field.
Would a fan get tossed? I'm thinking in a football game, there's that one commercial. Would a fan get tossed? Mike's 54. 54's the Mike. 54's the Mike.
Exactly.
They're going in and throwing that guy out.
No fan shall yell Omaha from the stands at a football game.
I get why I do get why
I
they
do
do it.
too.
But do you throw him out or you say, go put him in a seat with a horrible sight line?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I hope they moved him to a bad seat. I don't think that he should have been thrown out of the ballpark for that, or at least get him a beer. All right, and that brings us back then to the federal prosecutors charging four assistant coaches with fraud and corruption. That's enough of the fun. Mike and Off the Top, presented by Progressive Insurance, where they will compare rates for you so you get the best deal, even if it's not with Progressive, saving you time and money. Now that's Progressive. Call or click today. So there are really two separate pieces. For those of you who may have seen some headlines and seen some stuff flash by you on social media and maybe not delved deeply into this, Mike, I'll let you take the floor. But there are really two separate pieces of this. Right. Let's start with the piece relating to the assistant coaches, because that part of it really is despicable, and it's very easy to understand why it's a crime.
Okay, so basically you have four assistant coaches at this point who are named in documents. Auburn assistant Chuck Person. That's a
terrific NBA player
people
for a
are
long time. Yep.
Oklahoma State assistant Lamont Evans, Arizona assistant Emmanuel Richardson, and USC assistant Tony Bland. All have been somehow relieved, whether with pay, without, or with pay. Basically what they did, I mean, tale as old as time. I mean, with this one is basically trying to steer kids to certain either schools or agents or financial investors and getting paid for it. Basically, Hey, you give me a lot of money and I'll get this kid to you. I mean, this has been I want to put it in the simplest terms as it can. Assistant coaches get handed a bunch of money to steer really good players, to even tailors. Even tailors.
Yeah, guys who make their suits.
Guys who make their suits. Yeah. Tailors, financial advisors, agents.
And without those players these guys are taking money without those players knowing.
Right.
And thus, they're not necessarily steering them in a direction that they believe is in the best interest of these young men.
Right.
But they're just taking money to steer them in certain directions. I mean,
again,
that's really horrible.
This has been going on forever. So let's when you read this, don't go, oh my God, this is not new. They got caught. That's a part of it, and they may not be the only ones getting caught. As basically the FBI has said is, hey, gang, we got your playbook. Make it easy on yourself. We'll give you a number. Call us. Turn yourself in because we're going to eventually find more of you that are doing this. So we'll see where it goes, but that's it in a nutshell. Assistant coaches put money in their pocket to steer players toward agents, financial advisors, tailors, anything like that.
Correct.
That's one side.
I will admit something to you right now. You're saying this is a tale as old as time, and I believe you. You're much more plugged into this. This is stuff I did not really know
absolutely.
about.
Yeah.
That assistant coaches who are a guy like Chuck Person, how much money did he make in the NBA?
Yeah.
That he's taking, tens of thousands of dollars to steer a 19-year-old kid. And let's not get into the whole should they pay these kids or not argument today. But we all know they're not getting paid.
No, they're not. Right.
And we all know that whatever money they may be getting funneled under the table, and we're going to get to that part of this in a minute here, it pales in comparison to the money that Chuck Person made playing in the NBA. And he's taking tens of thousands of dollars to steer this kid towards an agent. He made $23 million playing in the NBA in his career. That's again, I should preface all this by saying, if true, these are at this point, he's just accused of this stuff, but that's really despicable. Because these kids trust these guys, right?
And there you go. Let me tell you about recruiting. Recruiting isn't about the head coach eventually will sign off on an assistant coach saying you can offer this guy a scholarship. The relationship built is with the assistant coach. The assistant coaches are the ones that go on the road. Now, the head coach will go on the road, but a lot of times they're going to the 5 stars. You know what I mean? But a lot of these guys can be 5 stars.
Right.
And the head coaches may have met with these guys at some point, but it's more, I'm meeting the top dog. Hey, we really want you, this and that. The over and over meetings and a relationship and whatever's allowed to be via text or phone call or visits, the assistant coaches do most of that. So the player, just as you said, builds that trust. So a lot of times for players who truly are not sure where they want to go and they're looking at everything, a lot of it can be about the trust you have with the assistant coach that keeps calling you or texting you or you're meeting with. How comfortable are you with him? It just goes on and on. It's like a player when I was going into the NFL and you start dealing with different agents. Who do you feel comfortable with when you go through that process? And there are agents that will give you money, and it's obviously another thing as well. So that's the comfort factor. And when you get comfortable with someone and they say they maybe want to come to your school, then it's not only come to your school, it's like, hey, things are going to go really well for you. I got a guy. Listen, there's a lot of sharks out there. I got a guy that's going to handle your money the right way.
Right.
I got a guy that's going to deck you out. When you're going to sitting there for the draft and after, he's going to deck you out. So you get that trust built up, and then they want to come to your school, and then you can steer them as well from there. Or if you say, if you come to my school, I can steer you to these places, which I know is the best thing for you. Believe me. The best thing for you as they put money in their pocket. That's how this goes.
That's the really despicable piece of this. Again, the other part of it, which we'll get to in a minute, which is what I would consider the tale as old as time, which is funneling money to a kid to come to a school. You could almost argue that's a victimless crime. I mean, it is breaking the NCAA rules. That was why I called Billis yesterday. I wanted to figure out what part of that is actually a crime, and we will explain
we'll
that
get
in
to
a moment.
That's the second part of it.
But this part of it, this is all being done without the kids knowing it.
Right.
And I'll keep calling them kids. I know some people get offended when you call them kids. When you get to be my age, those kids are kids, right? And my daughter just turned 17. These guys are 18 that we're talking about. So they are absolutely kids to me. And this is the one person in as you said, an ocean full of sharks they're supposed to be able to trust, who's supposed to be looking out for them. And so for those guys to be taking money on the side, I will admit, I did not know that was a tale as old as time. And that is the one that just personally, it bothers me much more than the other piece of this. As far as how significant it is from the standpoint of a federal crime, Jay Billis was on yesterday talking about that.
For everyone charged in this federal investigation, they could be looking at up to 20 years in prison. So that is certainly a lot more difficult to deal with than a postseason ban or a show cause penalty. And having the weight of the federal government behind these allegations and charges of wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering in two separate schemes, one to funnel players to specific institutions, and then to the shoe company itself, and then also to funnel players to investment advisors and agents. This is pretty pervasive.
So this next one we're going to talk about, I think, was going to make everybody's ears perk up a little more because it's going to involve a school we know and a person we know that's been in the headlines.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most famous coaches, I guess, in college basketball history, and that's Rick Pitino, who is directly in the middle of this and who everyone I spoke to yesterday and everyone I read yesterday said that if this turns out to be true, that they can't envision a scenario where he keeps his job.
No.
So that's what's at stake here. Let's make it clear. We're talking about the career of a guy who has come through a lot of scandals. I mean, including one of the highest profile and sort of unique scandals that we've ever seen with the strippers and everything else. The second piece of this story is the tale as old as time, as I know it, which is there is an allegation, and the word Louisville is never actually used in the complaint, but they couldn't steer you to it any more clearly than they did, and Louisville has acknowledged that it has received notice that it is the school in question.
Let's explain that with this one.
Basically, the accusation is that an assistant coach had the people, this guy at Adidas, a very high-ranking executive at Adidas, who has been charged by the feds, funnel $100,000 in 4 separate payments to the family of this 5-star recruit who signed with Louisville really late and under unusual circumstances in the process. His name is Brian Bowen, and he wound up signing at Louisville in early June. And so if all of this is true and proven, and in some of the conversations I had yesterday, it was suggested there's no way the feds take the steps they take yesterday if they don't have wiretaps and all kinds of things.
Oh, they had taps.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So let's just play out this timeline.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Because that's where it gets really...
June 11th is when the NCAA came down with the sanctions against Louisville for the whole Andrew McGee and the escorts and the
stripper scandal,
and the sex thing that Rick Pitino was appalled at and doesn't understand how that happened.
And has been suspended 7 games for, by the way.
It was June 11th. Also, what happened over the summer? Louisville and Adidas announced a 10-year, $160 million extension of their sponsorship deal. That was over the summer as well. Mm-hmm. So June 11th, the discipline came down on Louisville. July 27th, so 6 weeks later? 6 weeks later, there's an assistant coach in Vegas with a rep from Adidas talking about funneling thousands of dollars to potential high school recruits. And there was wiretapping there, to which the assistant coach was caught saying, "We got to be very low key." I mean, so let's be honest. There's 3 ways of this, unless I'm missing something, okay?
Go ahead.
As far as Rick Pitino, because that's what it could come back to, right?
Who did? You want me to read his statement quickly,
go ahead,
just so you have it?
Yes.
Here's what Pitino said, quote, "These allegations come as a complete shock to me. If true, I agree with the U.S. Attorney's Office that these third-party schemes initiated by a few bad actors operated to commit a fraud on the impacted universities and their basketball programs, including the University of Louisville. Our fans and supporters deserve better, and I'm committed to taking whatever steps are needed to ensure those responsible are held accountable."
So what you have is one of his assistant coaches bringing in strippers and stripping and having sex with recruits.
Andre McGee, yeah.
And then you have another assistant coach who's out in Vegas saying we got to keep this, on the down low. We were trying to get that, on the DL,
right?
And this money getting funneled to the player that commits to Louisville. And both times you have Rick Pitino saying, "Oh, man, this is stunning. I have no idea this is going on, and we're going to get to the bottom of it." So there's. And as I said, if you can think of another way, let me know. There's either I don't believe a word he's saying side of it. There's, I believe him. Listen, you can't monitor everything. So a few bad actors, like he said, we move on. Why should he lose his job? And then there's in the middle of, okay, if you slightly want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he truly knew nothing, then should he be fired for not knowing what the hell's going on in his program?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think that's what's going to cost him, is saying, okay, Rick, you can scream to the high heavens that you didn't know anything that was going on, but these aren't a couple of minor things that just went on by people that are a part of your basketball operation. And we are about to get bludgeoned over the head yet again for that.
Yeah, and actually, what you're talking about, I agree with you, are the three options in the court of public opinion.
Yes. Yeah,
in the NCAA, it's actually much clearer than that. They now have this coach's responsibility.
Right.
What's the exact wording of it?
Well, show cause,
the show cause penalty is what Andre McGee has.
Failure to monitor. Now, in the other case, he was not charged with failure to monitor the program.
Right.
He was charged with failure to monitor Andrew McGee, his assistant. So is he going to get another failure to monitor this coach, or is it going to be failure to monitor the program?
They somewhere along the way, Jay was telling me this yesterday, they changed recently the wording on that rule so that essentially the coach is ultimately responsible for all of this stuff.
Right.
He can't argue I didn't know.
Right.
It's his job to know. They've clarified that it's his job to know.
We may need to get Jay.
He's going down. I mean, the bottom line of it is that unless there is some huge mistake here, unless somehow Louisville can figure out a way, or he can figure out a way, or if someone can figure out a way that this didn't actually happen the way it sounds like it happened. And again, Mike read you the wiretaps and everything else. It seems impossible to imagine the NCAA will not go after Pitino, and considering the fact that he is already under the trouble that he's in and that he is already suspended for multiple games this coming season and all of the history, I haven't heard one person nor read one person who believes that unless there's some huge mistake involved here, that Pitino will keep his job.
Again, he's the big name in all this, but just to be factually correct, again, there were two universities sponsored by the Athletic Shoe Company. Court papers didn't name the schools, but contained enough details to identify them as Louisville and Miami. So just so we mentioned both schools, but most of the talk is going to be about Louisville because it's going to be about Rick Pitino and how this is probably going to be the end of him.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you, whether you're at home, your business, or online. We help keep you safe with security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT, home, safe home.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
All right, we're Mike and Mike. We roll along, and now we are Mike Cubed as Mike Golic Jr. has joined us here in our studio with thoughts on this. And of the three of us, two of us were at one time scholarship athletes.
Yes.
One of us recently. So we can have a little more recent perspective on the way things are working. How are you, Mikey?
I'm good. Unfortunately, I missed my $100,000 handshake during the course of my time as a scholarship athlete.
Yeah, and I had said there was, now you were at a time where you guys all committed early and it was done, For when I was getting recruited, we actually committed like after our senior years of high school, which seems absurd right now. And I had said it more than a few times. I got offered money by a couple of schools, a monthly stipend that they would give. But I at that point I wanted to go to Notre Dame. I committed to Notre Dame Thanksgiving in November after my senior year was just ending. But yeah, so I mean that happened. That was by schools, coaches, that.
Sure.
Kind of
so that's a tale as old as time, and we know about boosters, and we now know
Right.
about, particularly in basketball, where the shoe companies become involved in that. That's not much of a surprise, and so we will get to that on the Louisville piece of this in a second. But the part, Mikey, that I really didn't know about that much that your dad was explaining to me is also a tale as old as time, is this idea of assistant coaches who are lining their own pockets to steer kids in directions without those players knowing it that may not be in their players' best interest, towards financial advisors, towards agents who by definition are shady because they are engaged in something that is 100% outside the rules, and to guys who might make them suits and all of that to a slightly lesser degree. To what degree were you aware of that? To what degree does this surprise you, and what is your overall thought on it?
The idea of coaches doing it is a little more surprising because you always hear about the idea of runners when you're in college, like the guys that are the sort of third-party candidates designed by agents, by advisors, by all those same groups to just draw you towards that eventual person to be, whatever that role tends to be for you going forward. The idea of a coaching going forward is a little more nefarious just because all of this to that point undermines everything the NCAA claims to stand for. Again, like constantly showing what a sham the whole amateurism model is when you're supposed to go out there and protect and serve the student athletes and preserve their safety, and yet you're using the person with the power in this relationship with a relationship where kids are supposed to trust these guys. Especially, we always talk about this with assistants who you tend to be a little closer with than the head coaches in a lot of instances. So to take advantage of that relationship, and not like the situation with Adidas and all this where everyone's got a pretty clear understanding, like you're doing this to sign with a brand you can trust after all of this. The guy who popped all of this off, the guy who sang originally to the FBI, got indicted by the SEC for, fraudulently practicing as a financial advisor for, investing money in places that these guys weren't involved in. And we see this time and time again with athletes. So you're actually almost actively setting these kids up in a lot of cases to be taken advantage of later in life. So,
but think about the layout and think about if you are going to choose, if you're a manager, financial advisor, or whatever, and you're going to choose to go down a bad road, right? As Mike said, there were runners that would be on campus. So you start to think about it. Would you have better luck with a runner who the player doesn't know, as well, offering a bag of money or whatever it is? Or would you say, man, I bet there's assistant coaches out there that wouldn't mind making a few extra bucks. Now, you got to have everybody on the same page. They're going to have a way better chance of getting you that player than a runner is. So I think that's out but you got to have obviously everybody involved. The assistant coach has to be on it knowing full well that can come back and bite them like we're seeing right now. But if you think about if everybody chooses to go down the dark road, this is a make sense road if you're going to do it illegally. Who has the players' trust the most? Mike knows it. I know it. Any player knows it. Without question, it's the assistant coach who you're with all the time. Now you just have to find that assistant coach who wants to line his pocket a little bit.
And that's why this is, to me, so high on the despicable scale. I mean, forgetting the criminal justice scale, I understand each of these will come with their own penalties, and the law can recognize them any way they want. But here is the ultimate, Mikey, and I think you said it right, the ultimate example of people taking advantage of having the power in a relationship, walking into your house, and Mike, you said it now, probably texting these guys 40 million times a day in the recruiting process. We'll take care of your son. We'll be in and now they're taking money on their own to steer them in directions that they know by definition are not the right direction to go, because you're steering them towards someone who is shady to begin with because they're involved in this in the first place. So wherever that falls on the criminal justice scale, and clearly it's fraud and the feds are coming after them, it goes very high, much higher than the other piece of this does to me on the despicable scale.
And it's funny because when you listen to, there's a quote that stuck out to me because you're right, especially as it pertains to this, it's got all of the elements of that. But tell me what this sounds like to you in general, because this all goes back to the same place. This all goes back to a central theme we talk about in college sports all the time. And it was another quote from the FBI or the district attorney that came out with all of this. I'm forgetting his name right now.
The state's attorney, yeah.
The state's attorney that came out with this. But one of his quotes in addition, because he came ready with the quotes, by the way.
He had a writer.
For 10 charged men, the madness of college basketball went well beyond the big dance in March. Like, he's got a ghostwriter. Right. Congratulations. But here's the next line, and tell me what this sounds like. I'm going to remove the last part that makes it specific to this situation. Tell me what it sounds like. Month after month, the defendants exploited the hoop dreams of student athletes around the country, allegedly treating them as little more than opportunities to enrich themselves. What does that sound like? The NCAA. Because then you add the next words after that, through bribery and fraud schemes. And that makes it specific to this situation. But in an industry that's as flush with money now that creates problems like this, where you've got wealth disparities, certainly amongst the coaches, but you've got a group that's not making any money in all of this, so lining their pockets a little bit in this, because some of these assistant coaches were reportedly giving money to the players and all this to help kind of grease the wheel. And that little bit of money comparatively to a group that's not getting any of it in that circumstance is what creates the whole breeding on the whole disgusting petri dish where this can happen. But you remove those last little words about this situation, and it all just kind of sounds like the system we've been living in for a while.
So what's the answer to it? Because I try and say that, and your father yells and screams at me. So what is the answer to that? What is the solution to that? If indeed you sound like you agree with me that the amateurism model is broken, it isn't what it probably never was what they wanted it to be.
I agree with you. I mean, we don't butt heads on everything, but someone give me a solution.
So let's hear it. What's the solution?
The solution is
what keeps this from happening?
The solution is that the people in power have to decide that there needs to be a solution, because it's like anything else. The people that are on the bottom end of this shouldn't be asked to figure out the solution for themselves. It's the only thing that's going to change is if the NCAA and the people with the power decide, because we know if people with money and means and power want something done, when the NCAA wants something done, they get it done. And if they wanted to figure out something other than amateurism to make a lot of this stuff less of a problem and go away, and they wanted to figure out a system to play the players, guess how quick that would get done? The problem is it doesn't benefit them to get it done, so it's never going to get done.
Maybe the closest thing to an analogy I can think of is that for the longest time, and Mike Sr., you and I remember that for the longest time, we never sent professional athletes of any kind to the Olympics. They weren't, I mean, anyone who ever touched a penny from a sport went to the Olympics. And then all of a sudden we lost in basketball in 1988. And the next thing you know, Michael Jordan was there, and Magic Johnson was there, and Charles Barkley was there. We can't have this. So they changed that when they decided they wanted to change it. And that's okay. To me, it took a lot of the fun out of it, but that's neither here nor there for the purposes of this discussion. So I agree with you, Mikey, that if they wanted to, the first issue in this is they don't want to change it. They don't want to change it because it's working for everyone who stays in it, and the people for whom it is not working are transient. They come and go by definition in a 4 or 5 year span.
And while we disagree on some things, I have no problem if we can find some sort of solution to this. Now, you're talking about a solution to some corruptness in a business, in an organization. Well, pick a business and pick an organization.
Yes, there's always going to be some corruption.
Something.
But this is begging for it.
I know, but where we start to differ is when you want to open all doors, and I say, no, I don't want to open all doors. There's got to be somewhere in between. So I'm certainly willing to listen to scenarios out there, but I haven't heard any yet where I'm going to say, okay, let's do this. But we know other people are absolutely going to line their pockets off the players. I get that.
I got Gruden and Herbie back-to-back in the next hour, which means I'm going to lose Mikey, so I got a bunch I want to get to with you here. We haven't gotten with you to the Rick Pitino piece of this. This is a Hall of Fame legendary coach. I don't think that's overstating it. He's one of the most successful coaches in the history of college basketball and had 2 very high-profile NBA stints as well. So he's been a constant on the basketball scene at this point for close to 4 decades. Assuming that all of this is not some crazy mistake, and that seems very difficult to believe at this point, Mike Golic Jr., do you see any way in the world he survives this?
No, because in what world is he not in some way culpable in all this, right? Like either he's lying to us and he knew exactly what happened, like it's Rick Pitino saying, I'm so shocked and surprised by this, as his mouth is covered in blood in front of the carcass that's bleeding out before him, or we assume on the other end that he had no idea any of this is happening, and that's probably worse in my mind, right? Like, as the guy that's supposed to be really taking care of all this, you don't know any of it, and this is now multiple times in an egregious way it's happened? Nah, you can't survive.
So that's what it comes down to. We know if he knew what was going on, there's no question, but and one of the reasons we want to get Jay on is kind of how the rule has changed about culpability of a head coach, because there's a thought, can a head coach know 100% of what's going on all the time? Because head coaches usually know just about everything that's happening with their players. Maybe a little different in football because it's 85 scholarship and usually 100 players. In basketball, you got, 15, or so, however many are 15 to 20 on the practicing. So that's the biggest question. If you absolutely believe he knew nothing, should he still lose his job? Because how can this happen under his watch? And I think that we know the answer.
Yeah, because I know wrongful termination is the thing that schools are certainly worried about, but Rick's already a guy that's, on probation for some of these other things, and certainly has, I think, areas where you could exploit some of this if you're the school and you're trying to get out from under this.
We read his statement a little bit earlier today, again saying he knew nothing about this. And for what it's worth, Forbes has measured Louisville as the most valuable college basketball program in the country every year since 2011. So if you wonder why have they stood by him through previous scandals, there's your answer. Will they do it again? Can they do it again? Time will tell. Okay, one more thing I wanted to get to with Mikey before the cake. The player with style is brought to you by J.C. Penney. Guys get Levi's lowest prices of the season, like 502 regular taper fit and 514 straight fit for $39.99 each. That's getting your penny's worth at J.C. Penney. There is no player in the NFL with more style than Odell Beckham Jr. But now he has aggravated the guy who owns his team. John Mara sent an email to several media outlets yesterday after Odell's little dog peeing celebration in the end zone, in which he wrote, I do not want to get into a discussion about this, but I will say that I'm very unhappy with Odell's behavior on Sunday, and we intend to deal with it internally. What's the dealing with this? How you got a guy, it keeps happening. This one, it's just I don't even know exactly how to describe what it is. It's distasteful and ridiculous. So Mike Golic Jr., what do we do? What is your John Mara? What do you do?
You go down there and you ask him politely not to do it, and then you hope he keeps doing it from the end zone. Like, he scored 2 touchdowns again this weekend. He had 97 yards. Your offense looks dreadful without that guy on the field. You're going to pay him, and if not, you're going to regret not paying him despite all this, because just like you said with Rick Pitino, we give a lot of leeway to people that are good at what they do, and Odell Beckham Jr. is great at what he does. And so at the end of the day, you kind of overlook stuff like that, and it's tough because it keeps happening with him, and you want to see him grow up a little bit to try and mitigate some of this, but you also understand that if you're John Mara, your bottom line is the bottom line, and that's going to be the guy that keeps making sure that works out in your favor.
Yeah, this isn't going to be the, hey, you stop this or you're going to be gone type of conversation that would happen with, the 38th guy on the roster or the 42nd guy on the roster. This is probably a little more sternly than, hey, could you please stop that, especially if it's coming from the owner. It may be a little more, we're going to have to really think about fining you, if you're going to keep doing something like this.
Can they fine him for that?
I'm not sure what kind of leeway they've got at this point.
I don't know.
It did get a flag. It was a 15-yard
penalty. It got a flag. So I don't know if you can or not. But to Mike's point, nothing's going to happen to him. He's going to be on that team, and they're going to pay him, or they're going to regret not paying him.
And I'll differentiate this from what we saw in the past, where some of his sideline blow-ups, where Eli Manning had to go over and calm him down on the sideline and try and get him back. This, to me, is a lot less, because this is just him going a little above and beyond in a celebration. This isn't a detriment to the team. This isn't a detriment to the on-field
he has
product.
done the other, because I agree with you. The sideline stuff, I forget. He's taken his helmet off in the end zone and gotten a 15-yard penalty. That's just stupid. He needs to stop the stupid, is what he needs to do, because I'm with you. The sideline stuff doesn't affect me, and players will walk by that and not even worry about it. It's when you cost your team.
For what it's worth, this did draw a 15-yard penalty.
Yes, it did. That's why this is in that category.
It is costing his team. Okay, Mike and Mike Golic Jr., one more thing, and for the Golics, this is the most important part. Golic, we got a celebration working here.
Now, it's Mike's birthday tomorrow, okay? You didn't take it out of it, Bickler. Take the cake out of there. Are you serious?
You had one job.
One job to do. So I got a cake. It's his birthday tomorrow, but Mike's traveling tomorrow to do football. So I got him this little cake here.
What kind of cake you got?
I don't know. I got the cake. I whipped it up and made it. I don't know what I made.
Very well
Okay,
done.
I did make it. So I'm just going to cut it. Just a little happy birthday. Mike,
take a small slice.
Mike said, no, you're not really.
Why are you just cutting it in two pieces? You're cutting it directly down the middle.
Mike, you're what, 28, right?
28.
There you go.
Golden birthday this year.
There's your piece.
Damn, oh yeah.
All right. And there
My
is
God, that is an enormous piece of cake.
Piece right there.
So they just cut, for those of you listening on the radio, they just cut a reasonably big cake into just 2 pieces, and Mikey is now eating it with his hands. How is that?
It's a good cake.
There you go. There's a fork for you if you want it.
Yellow cake. Oh. I didn't find all that necessary.
Oh, did somebody else want some?
No. I'm good now.
Okay.
Believe me, after you've licked your disgusticating fingers and gone over that thing the way you have.
That's how I know I can keep all my food away from you.
I'm real interested in that. All right, we've got Gruden and Herbie coming up. Happy birthday, Mike Golic Jr. Back in a flash, Mike and Mike.